Okay, guys, hello. Welcome to the live stream. Sorry we're late here. It's been quite the evening. Sorry we're late here. Okay. Welcome. Hopefully you guys are ready for a little chit chat tonight. It's gonna be all good vibes, all positive vibes. Okay. Let's get rid of these ads. Hopefully the volume's okay for everybody. Cool. Hope you guys are having a good week and living that green revolution. You know what I mean? Getting out there, maybe doing some D-trashes, that kind of stuff. So, our first topic tonight is going to be renewable energy. France's biogas sector is booming, guys. The French. Yeah, we can definitely learn from our European folks across the pond on how to be a little bit more environmental. So let's take a look at what the French got going on here.
He's one of the first in France to have taken the leap. Maurice Quack has set up an anaerobic digester on his farm to break down organic matter produced by his animals and in turn create gas.
The digester mimics what happens inside a cow's digestive system. We've recreated part of that process within the tanks.
It's been 10 years since he first invested in the system. Waste collected from the herds, crops and foods is all used to produce biogas, which is just as good quality as the conventional fossil fuel gas. Maurice is able to generate 13 gigawatt-hour per year and feed this back into the pipes. That's enough to supply several hundreds of households nearby.
We're able to produce our own renewable energy.
French is such a cool
By
sounding
2030, farmers and all the others involved in anaerobic digestion in France should be able to produce 20% of our country's energy requirements. So if we develop it properly, we won't need to rely on Russian gas anymore.
And the digestate, which is what remains after the fermentation, can be used in the fields.
This digestate has retained all of its agronomical benefits. It isn't organic, but compared to the chemical fertilizers I used to buy, it's much more natural. So there are two positives here: less pollution and less dependence on the ever-changing value of common chemical fertilizers, which is directly linked to energy prices, which have soared these past months.
While organisations like the World Wildlife Fund recognise the benefits of biogas, they're warning against new practices that could impact the prices and availability of raw materials.
What we don't want to see is farmers using pesticides, artificial fertilizers, or irrigating fields just to collect waste for digesters. After all, the point of farming is to provide food.
But farmers in France will soon be able to rely on a new source of waste, with leftovers from homes set to be collected as of next year. The system has already been put into place by several councils in the Paris region. People like Hilly Boustex spread the awareness, handing out small brown bins to residents.
So in here, you need to put all of your food waste, all of your leftovers, eggshells, yogurt, bones, anything from your meals. You can put it in here.
So when I peeled the potatoes...
Exactly.
It's compost, basically.
When I get up in the morning, I know I'm doing something that's good. I'm doing it for a cause that I care about a lot, for the planet. It pains me to see all of this rubbish on the floor, to see that not everyone recycles, or everyone using cars. I'm doing something that will make a change here.
Food waste here will be sent to a new processing plant in the northwest of Paris. The centre aims to provide enough gas for 5,000 households and enough digestate to fertilise 2,000 hectares.
From farm to plate to bin, the food sector accounts for 15% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So by changing some of our habits, we're reducing our impact on the climate.
The sector currently produces 8.5 terawatt-hour, more than a single nuclear reactor. And France is hoping to double its production.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty intense numbers there, guys. Apparently, this new technology, they can double it by 2025. The sector already produces the equivalent of the energy capacity of a nuclear reactor. So I guess I realize the French people's energy usage is probably a little bit lower, especially in these areas. That being said, I mean that's a lot of power, guys. That's quite a bit of power. So like the one guy said in here, you know, we get this guy. We got to be careful to make sure we're not polluting to gain this energy. But you know, all these solutions that we're coming up to solve these climate crises also come with some problems. So every solution almost creates one or two more problems. So, but you know, step forward is a step forward. So that's good. Moving forward with solutions. So that's what the French got going on. Here we go. Electricity market reform. Take the market out. Europeans Commission proposed reform for the electricity market would be a little bit of a plaster for a failing system. A sticking plaster, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what that really means, but... So yeah, energy prices. Obviously, energy is becoming a big problem everywhere, but... The Commission's draft proposal to reform the EU's electricity market issued last month, however, falls short of such a promise. Measures amid vulnerable households, such as a ban on disconnections, are commendable. It would likely only serve as a temporary fix for an ailing market. Rather than address the underlying issues and systemic challenges, the proposal risks offering only sticking plaster. So, in American terms, a Band-Aid. This is just a Band-Aid. But, yeah, these philosophies of least cost planning would put the demand and supply measures on equal footing. The planning would be carried out by public-owned energy providers with a mandate and the capacity to roll out energy-efficient improvements to homes, significantly reducing bills. So yeah, this is one thing that Europe struggles with. You know, they have great healthcare and free healthcare for everybody, but their energy costs are so high. Everybody's energy costs are so high. It's just one of these modern problems that needs some modern solutions, some really innovative stuff. But the key is we have to be careful that we don't destroy the environment and, you know, providing this energy and this power. So, and I don't know how I feel about nuclear energy. Germany just got rid of theirs, but you know, from what I know, it seems to be relatively clean if it's done properly. But I'm definitely no nuclear engineer. But I mean, if there's alternatives like this that are, you know, environmental friendly, that can provide our power and our energy, then why not? I mean, this is just another super interesting thing with the biogas farming and stuff like that. Here's another one too, the geothermal energy. This is another super interesting one, how we can power our modern society. The Biden administration eyes a relatively untapped climate solution to revolutionize how homes are heated and cooled. So yeah, looks like Lansing, Michigan here. Yeah, you got the geothermal heating. Yeah, it reduces pollution. And on Tuesday, the DOE will announce the communities will range from the size of New York City to Nome, Alaska, have received the first round of funding to help them reimagine on homes. Stay comfortable. Geothermal heating and cooling could eventually be brought into homes and buildings using heat pumps, which are highly efficient appliances that circulate warm and cool air through buildings, according to the department. The heat pump is basically run from the heat in the ground. Project manager of the DOE's Geothermal Technologies Office says the fuel is basically the Earth's source of heat. Yeah, I've read a lot about this over the years. This seems super interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of progress in this in the future. And as long as that we can do it cleanly, it's great. Yeah, the administration has found that the climate potential of geothermal energy is used. So far, it's only used on a much smaller scale than other clean technologies like solar or wind. Yeah, 90 gigawatts by 2050. So yeah, I mean, that's great. 90 gigawatts by 2050, which could cut around 1 billion metric tons of planet warming emissions, roughly the same amount as taking 20 million cars off the road per year. So I mean, yeah, that's great. That's progress, guys. That's awesome. So good on the Biden administration actually for making this happen and putting some funding in here. This is interesting. This just happened too. This was yesterday, I think. There are 23 known communities that are using geothermal to heat and cool their buildings. The best known example of this is in Boise, where water-warm geothermal energy is used to heat more than 6 million square feet of building space. Still, the U.S. is behind the ball on technology. These are fairly common in Europe, where geothermal is used. There's a lot of competition for other energy sources, mostly oil, gas, of course. Lack of knowledge about this technology in the U.S., even though it's been around for a long time. The DOE's goal is to eventually have a quarter of each of the selected communities' overall heating and cooling be supplied by geothermal. Yeah, so that's sweet. Very cool. Hopefully, yeah, stuff like this is the macro level stuff that's exciting to see happen. You know, I don't like getting my hopes up because a lot of times it's all wishy-washy and no real effective change happens. But this actually looks pretty good. This looks like something. This is definitely a climate solution, I'll say. So on to this one here, guys. This is a fun one. This is more of a fun one. It's kind of depressing, but it's also kind of fun. So we'll read this one here by Antonio Meloni. Sorry if I abused your name there, sir. The article is, "Your job is useless. Society is producing an endless variety of unnecessarily and meaningless bullshit jobs. Work, consume, repeat. It might be time to end this system." This is funny. This is fine. This is fine. What's your time worth to you? What importance do you place on your physical and mental health? How many hours a week do you work? How much a year is that? You know, how much in a lifetime? Is it worth it? Do you feel like life is well spent? You probably don't, and you shouldn't. Instead of wasting your time in mostly and oftentimes utterly meaningless jobs, you could use that incredible, almost frightening amounts of hours, days, years for more fulfilling activities, like spending time on things you love with your family, friends, more time in nature, more time with your pet, that Labrador that's waiting for you at home, wondering what the hell you're doing all day where you're at work. You could spend more time living. What a radical thought, huh? The capitalist never-ending pursuit of more, always more economic growth, GDP, wealth, not for you, working class peasant, but for them. The destruction of everything that cannot be commodified, such as animals, nature, happiness, and purpose, endangers our health, society, and the environment. Most life on this planet is already dead, and that's just the beginning. What survives is what's useful to us. And yet, you keep working. Every day, you go and sell yourself. You do it because there's no choice and no alternative. Well, how much longer? When does life begin? Work under late-stage capitalism. When I speak of work or jobs in the context of this essay, I define those concepts in institutionalized terms. Work is what you engage in because you must, not to starve or become homeless, and not the activities you would do anyway, such as painting, gardening, taking care of animals, or writing books, which are highly labor-intensive occupations. Work, in the general sense of physical or mental exertion to achieve some goal, can be beautiful and meaningful, and most, if not all, people would engage in such, even if and when the very concept of money were to collapse. We are sort of a busy species and always will be. It's more of a question of compulsion and the act of sort of an activity that one would engage in. People would likely still farm and produce and maintain, even clean and repair, everything that is deemed meaningful and important. But few, if anyone, would voluntarily open up an Excel spreadsheet ever again or schedule an entirely pointless meeting. I mean, that's just so true right here, huh, guys? Crazy, but true. There's a clear radical difference between the two definitions of work. One which most people fail to grasp. For example, I could spend countless hours on writing my new book or working on other personal priorities. It's incredible hard mental work, but I love it, and I would write that thing even if it wouldn't have any monetary payoff. And trust me, there hardly is any. Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, that's the case with passions. But toss me into an office where I've been productive for like 3 or 4 hours a day. I could spend the rest of my time on Reddit pretending to be on Reddit. I drowned. There's an unrecognized pandemic of experience taking hold of society, especially younger generations that are being gaslighted and thinking that's the norm in the ideal world as those before them. Yet any sort of physical labor, which is far more essential than anything ever done in an office, is deemed inferior by the system. And so is caring labor, which is still mostly done by women. Facts clearly reflected in capitalism's built-in system of social credit, i.e. wages and money. Complaints of someone living in a rich Western nation. I know. What do purpose or happiness matter in the face of survival, you might ask? So many people have it so much worse, and they'll give it all to sit in front of a computer all day. Well, the very same systems that created and sustain our meaningless world have also made it the miserable world of the global south. Colonialism, slavery, imperialism, debt, neoliberalism, and so on and so forth. Take apart the one and you liberate the other. But I digress. That's a different discussion altogether, which one I'll come to soon enough. Anyway, the difference between personal or collective work, for example, building a communal shed with your neighbors, and institutionalized work, anything you wouldn't do without the threat of starvation, is crucial and worth keeping in mind. So back to institutionalized work and jobs. We work far more than is necessary, and that is a fact. Consider all the technological advances we made in the last couple of 100 years. All the productive gains, all the progress, all the new products. The purpose of all this was to make our lives more comfortable and to provide us with the freedom to spend more of our times as we see fit. So it was supposed to liberate us from toil, wasn't it? Instead, we are working more than ever, subsuming our entire lives under this curious concept of earning our livelihoods. This abstract concept of career, no one, absolutely no one but you will ever care or remember. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's late-stage capitalism. And it's important to note one thing above all. All those gains in productivity, all those profits, all that growth had but one goal, further enriching those at the top. It never had anything to do with improving the lives or making the general populace happier, else we wouldn't live in this dystopia of a mass ecosystem collapse and unprecedented wealth gaps. For many reasons, among them the fact that working class cannot be left alone with their thoughts and might revolt, we live in a highly work-oriented culture. In the West, the economic system does an excellent job of meeting our basic needs. As a result, we are spending an astonishing amount of time doing jobs that we could easily do without. These jobs that don't add much or any value to ourselves or others are often not even companies. But we created so that everyone could have, well, something to do, or otherwise to improve the status of managers who love to have as many underlings as possible to increase their status. For much more detailed analysis on all this, please refer to David Graeber's phenomenal bullshit jobs. Yeah, guys, this is great. Everything David Graeber did is absolutely incredible. His last book before he passed away, he did with David Winthrow, the Dawn of Humanity, is fantastic. And it definitely goes. I mean, most of the jobs, especially in our culture here, are these management type positions that are just awful and useless, and they end up having the most power, and they gain more power by the more underlings they have, and they manipulate the system for their own gain, and the corruption goes all the way up the chain. So it's much more clearly broken down for you in David Graeber's bullshit jobs, but I digress. Mindless office work, which makes most people unhappy, is the best example of all this. Trust me, I've been there. But as mentioned, there is often a lack of financial incentive to do anything else. The dull, useless, and often actively harmful office jobs are usually very lucrative. And the most parasitic sector of all, finance. Yeah, guys, I don't think there's ever been a truer statement. Finance is definitely the most parasitic sector that contributes nothing back into the system. Yeah, which is, another sad reality that capitalism is now failing, just like communism did. It just only lasted a little bit longer. The train was only running on E a little bit longer than communism in the global, historical context of things. But yeah, it's a curious circumstance that capitalism, a system that supposedly promotes efficient allocation of resources, discourages waste and idleness, in the single most wasteful socio-economic system in human remembrance. Never before have we wasted such an astounding amount of natural resources and human labor. Never before have we extracted and exploited as much. And never before have we obliterated and poisoned such huge swaths of land to produce mostly what? Garbage. And this is true, guys. This is the real reason why I'm starting this channel. Because I think restoration is the most important word in the English language right now. If there's a word that we can get behind more than anything, it's restoration. Because we simply don't know how to curb our consumption. What we can do is restore the things that have already been produced, so that way we can, by proxy, we consume less. So that's a pretty simple equation for me, having to exist in our current reality until we can make some changes to capitalism and merge it with some older systems, or I don't know, make a new hybrid system, or figure something else out that works. Until we can do that, the most important word in the English language is restoration. And this word garbage needs to change. We need to change the definition of this word. If we can get out there and pick up as much litter and trash and restore as many ecosystems and natural habitats as we can, and reduce this word here, we need to stop producing things that end up as garbage. So, moving on. The misrepresentation comes from the two faulty equations. GDP growth equals happiness, progress, and consumption equals happiness and progress. An experiment. Try throwing away most of the things that you think you need and see what happens. The results might surprise you. I can only speak for myself, but I've never been happier or more content since I've deleted almost all of my social media profiles, canceled all my subscriptions, and sold my TV and most other electronic devices. Now I spend most of my time talking to my girlfriend, reading, writing, and preparing for my upcoming 2-month through hike, the Austrian Alps. This doesn't mean I escape capitalism by any sort of thing, of course. That would be outrageous. There's no such thing as escaping an ideology that permeates everything and covers every single square meter of this planet. That's a fun one, huh? It's a fun little shot. Let us briefly consider the almost endless bureaucracy and accompanying stupidity that has taken hold of our society instead of becoming a more efficient using fewer resources over time. Most administrative apparatuses keep growing. Yeah, I mean, that's so true. There's barely anything going on here, guys, that's positive in the current, running of things, but a myriad of positions with astounding job descriptions no one quite understands, not even those who occupy them. Most of those jobs are entirely unnecessary and exist solely to provide anyone with a position of comfort. New ones are created, constantly increasing our society's complexity and associated maintenance costs and encouraging nepotism and corruption. Yeah, these are the two biggest words that plague capitalism, guys, and they are the downfall of it, which is why I am no longer a capitalist. And we need a hybrid restoration of our definition of how we, of these terms. So, another case where jobs involve production, short-lived, fast fashion, garbage, plastic toys for children, which are likely bad for them. Do we need new types of clothing all the time? Do we need trends? One could argue that we needed the clothing in prehistoric times already. Clothes should be used to keep you warm and comfortable. Everything else just seems unnecessary. But capitalism tells us otherwise, of course. It tells us that we need those things. Your child needs that bullshit plastic toy. Without those products, we are less. We are not less, guys. There are, of course, many jobs that our society could not function without. Consider doctors, nurses, teachers, such as myself, I might humbly add scientists, and the like, but also artists, musicians, writers, entertainers. What would the world be like without them? So many people find fulfillment in what they do, even if the job itself might not strictly be useful or necessary. And there's nothing bad about that whatsoever. You enjoy making Excel spreadsheets and marketing presentations? Be my guest. If there's one thing that we should value above all else, it's freedom. And no, please, not the propagandized Orwellian version of the word, so commonly abused in our anti-democratic systems. No, I mean real freedom. The kind of freedom David Graeber and David Wengrow define in The Dawn of Everything. Yeah, I mean, this is another one, guys. Buy that book, read that book, listen to that book, do whatever you got to do to get a hold of that book. But that book changed your life. The freedom to walk away, the freedom to disobey, the freedom to reimagine society. Please work if you want, consume if you want, but do not force me to engage in all the bullshit and destruction for God's sake. For once, consider the price. And yeah, that's unrealistic. Either everyone participates or no one participates. There is no free land anymore, anyone could flee to and build anew. And even if there was, everything is dead. There is no alternative. There is no escape. Big Brother is watching, always, and despite the idealistic claims, the system cannot abhor competition and must eliminate it all until we are left with the monopoly on shit. Might as well start a revolution, eh? I agree. We need a non-violent revolution, and we need to replace our current, whatever you want to call this. I guess it is already a bastardization, hybridization of capitalism that we exist in. It's just this ideology that permeates everything. But I digress. This is a good way to build a new society would be to remove jobs like this. These are the big ones. Hedge fund managers, advertising executives, lobbyists, everything recruiting in HR, stockbrokers, private prison guards, telemarketers, online course gurus, payday lenders, investment bankers, CEOs, military recruiters, real estate agents, debt collectors. Everyone works for the IDF, the World Bank, WTO, in any capacity whatsoever. Those guys who still job it is to discredit unions and all politicians. So that's more than a few, but yeah. So I thought that was a really cool article, really well said. I don't know if I would go to the extremes that this guy would and say that, you know, we can't have, we have to have some form of money or some form of incentivization, like Terrence McKenna talks about all the time. We need to have a capitalism of means, a capitalism of ideas. We need to make the profit motive be a non-material motive. And I think that will probably be the best solution. That will be the best motif to design the future system off of. But I'm no economist or social engineer or any of that trash. So, cool. Yeah, super cool article. Go ahead and like his stuff, guys. Antonio Melonio. So we'll end tonight, guys, with a really quick one from Terrence. He has this little story that I like to tell. It's just really abstract and funny. So we'll let Terrence take it away. An elf told me now that there's a fine thing for a scientist to say. An elf told me that time travel is possible, but it's constrained in ways which are not normally part of our expectation of time travel. The way in which it's constrained is once time travel is discovered, you can travel as far into the future as you wish, but you can't travel into the past any further than the moment of the invention of the first time machine. So yeah, super cool concept. The premise of this is time travel is possible, but you can always travel into the future, but you can never travel back in the past farther than when the first time machine was invented. So the reason for this is that before the invention of the first time machine, there were no time machines. And how could you take a time machine into a domain where there aren't any? You see, it's just to preserve the logical consistency. That's like saying that you can't drive a car where there hasn't been a car driven before. So that's right. You can't take a car where there are no roads. When cars were first invented, the main objective to them was, what are you going to do with this thing? It can't go where a horse can go, so what good is it? So here's a fantasy scenario, which for a while I liked very much. It's that quantum physics and nanotechnology and all this malarkey is refined and focuses towards the notion of building a time machine. So super cool concept here from Terrence, guys. So then in the morning of December 22nd, 2012, the World Time Institute in the Amazon first time journey is about to be taken. And the whole world is watching, and the holographic television as Lady Teppelnot is strapped to the machinery and will hurl her centuries into the future. And there's a countdown, and the button is pushed, and she goes off. Now, most people's interest would be to follow this woman wherever she goes, but let's forget her for a moment. The point has been made. She disappears. We assume she went off into the future, but what happens right there, right then? It seems to me in the very next millisecond, thousands of time machines would begin arriving from the future simply because they had been driven to the end of the road. They had come back to the time and witnessed the first journey into the future. It's as though you could take your Piper Cub and fly it into the Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, 1906 to see the Wright Flyer take off, you see? Are you all with me so far? Now, there's a problem with which some of you, I'm sure, are thinking of. I hope anyway. It's called the grandfather paradox, which is the old conundrum that haunts all time travel schemes, which is, if time travel were possible, you can go back in time and kill your own grandfather. Well, then you wouldn't exist. Well, so then this sets up the logical impossibility. Either you exist or you don't exist. And some science fiction authors have assumed that somehow massive influxes of synchronicity would preserve your grandfather. You know, you would approach him with your Saturday night special, it would blow up in your hand and ricochet off the St. Christopher medal he always wore, blah, 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 and something like that, and you could not be killed by you because in that case you wouldn't exist, in which case he couldn't be killed by you. And this troubled me for a long time. What exactly would happen in this situation? Because according to Hans Moravec of the Robotics Institute of Carnegie Mellon University, time travel is no big deal. The first paragraph of his paper is, the last few years have been good for time machines. Kip Thorne, from the renowned General Relativity Group at Caltech, invented a new quantum gravitational approach to building a time gate, and an international collaboration gave a convincing rebuttal to the grandfather paradox arguments. Another respected group suggested time machines that exploit quantum mechanical time uncertainty. The technical requirements for these suggestions exceed our present capabilities, but each new approach seems less onerous than the last. There's hope yet that time travel will eventually become possible, even cheap. So then I saw another possibility in the way we can fulfill this expedition of Christian hermeneutics by not require the second coming of Christ in the intersection of God Almighty into history, or all these other extremely unlikelihoods. And to understand it, we have to have a recourse to physical model in a very simple realm of chemistry and physics, which Bernoulli gas laws. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with these. They are intuitive and easy to understand. And we have a cylinder, and it's a vac. It contains a vacuum. And at one end of the cylinder, we have a valve, and the valve is connected to a line, which is then connected to a tank of some inert gas, say nitrogen. So we open the valve to let nitrogen rush into the cylinder that previously was a vacuum. Now what happens inside the cylinder? I think it's intuitively obvious to all of us. The pressure equalizes over all points equally. In other words, you can't have 50 pounds of pressure at one end of the cylinder and 5 pounds of pressure at the other. We understand that in gas, pressure distributes itself evenly in order to achieve equilibrium. So, okay, hold on, your notion in your mind. So that's the second lever of the Bernoulli metaphor. Now let's get back to the situation with Lady Tepamud off into the future. I'm not familiar with the overcome the grand paradox, but we'll pretend the grandfather paradox is very strong. I want to say something about the grandfather paradox. So I'm close to question time. Let me proceed forward relentlessly. The coffee's running out. So we send Lady Temponaut off into the future. But now, with what we know about the equalization of high cultures versus low and temporal medium, what happens from our point of view is that the rest of history of the universe happens instantly. That even if billions of years of human culture and downloading of machines and claiming the star system after star and so forth and so on, somehow that the state vector for all those events system collapses. I call this the God whistle principle. It is that we can actually call God into history. We can summon the end state of human evolution to appear in a millisecond, after we successfully achieve the implementation of this technology of time travel in order to avoid all paradoxes that would prevail if there were any extension to post-time travel era beyond the moment of its inception. So this is a way of, in a sense, forcing the evolution, the universe, and it creates a phase transition of the eschaton. And us is, to my mind, it creates the bastion of attraction within the domain of our own lives. Now, is this any kind of precedent for something like this, even metaphorically in our own experience? Well, it turns out, yes, there is. It's kind of a bizarre anecdote, which should sober us considerably as we think about these things. When the first atomic weapon was built by the Manhattan Project in the desert of New Mexico, Fermi and Oppenheimer and all these people got together the night before the test at Trinity and Fermi and had a pad on which we had scrawled on some equations. And he had reached the conclusion that in the week before they were not sure how high the temperature would go when they triggered the device. And Fermi had some back-of-the-envelope calculations which caused him to believe that the nitrogen in the atmosphere of the planet would begin to burn if they tested this thing. And they would, in effect, ignite the atmosphere and the planet, and the whole fireball would spread around the entire planet and destroy everything. And they spent half the night going over these things, and they finally decided that the information necessary to make the decision was not available. So they said, well, hell, throw the switch. So yeah, guys, that's how we did it with the nukes. Why not time machines? It'll show those Japs and Germans that we mean business. Of course, they tested and carried out. The nitrogen did not burn. Instead, we ushered in the glorious area of weapons of mass destruction. So, let me see if this got some notes. I think I've covered everything. What's interesting in this for the first time, I think in the article by Franz Tipler called The Omega Point as the Eschaton, he sees that this is why Paul here and I couldn't really get into this crazy to repeat what you can't understand, but by an analysis and interpretation of quantum mechanics, Tipler reaches the conclusion that there is an omega point, and it does represent the funneling together of all the what are called world lines. And he, for purposes of mental comfort, sets it far in the future, but in principle, there is no reason to do that. 12 or 13 years ago, the Swedish cosmologist Hans Alfvén wrote a wonderful little book called Worlds and Anti-Worlds, in which he made the suggestion that the entire universe is what's called a vacuum fluctuation, ex nihilo, literally out of nothingness. However, there's a caveat, which is the creation of ex nihilo can only occur if what's called parity is conserved. Now, what this means is these particles, which come into being out of nothingness, must come into existence paired with the antiparticle. And so it comes into being, let's say, an electron and an anti-electron. They divide on separate trajectories, and then they reconnect and collide with each other, and a parity is conversed. In other words, nothing really happened. No laws of physics were violated because they annihilated each other. So, yeah, it goes on and on here, guys, about these vacuum fluctuations, and, yeah. It's fascinating. You're playing with physics, and you know everything has to be conserved. It's not just parity in the vacuum fluctuation. I mean, matter, antimatter, dozens of conservations. Inside your body, there are trillions of these virtual reactions occurring all the time, and they can be intercepted. I mean, you have a gamma ray break into a particle and antiparticle. You can have an intercept coming together, and that's how they detect the photographic plates and cloud changes. But everything you said is right. One thing I don't think the notion of the Big Bang, I'm not sure whether to describe the Big Bang model, but it sounds far-fetched because if there was something in the universe, we have a real problem explaining how it got there. So, the simplest thing to us humans is nothing there. Yeah, it is very similar to the concepts of Buddhism, guys. So, yeah, super interesting concept, super interesting thought experiment. If you guys were to picture that in your minds, like a time-traveling device, if we were to get there, some sort of paradox. Yeah, bunch of cool references in there, guys. Like I said, can't get enough Terence McKenna. He's so awesome, so amazing. Dive into his stuff. Just thought that'd be a fun little mind experiment, little project for you to mull over in your brains for this evening. So, love you guys so much. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Make sure you're out there living that green revolution, guys. It's so important. We can all do our little part, and let's get in tune with Mother Gaia here. Let's get in tune with Gaia and the Heavenly Father, and let's combine the old ways into our new ways, and find ways to progress together in the future, and make a better living experience for everybody. So, sweet. Peace out, y'all. Thanks again.